Good evening. I am not Jesse Flowers. All right. So, like I said, all those provisos and that Jesse did in his first lesson certainly apply here as the fill-in guy who's just getting started with one teenager, one preteen, and one 9-year-old who can have just as much drama in his life as a teenager sometimes. Obviously, I don't have the answers, but we hope that we can find the answers in God's Word, and we trust that. But we're drawing a lot of inference on this subject. We take the scriptures that are provided to us, and then it's good to narrow down our focus to a specific category and see how different scriptures apply to those situations. And here it's not just raising children, but raising teenagers. And so we got to about lesson or question number 4. So we talked about some things parents can do to prepare. That was question 1. While teenagers enjoy the days of their youth, what do parents need to make sure they are mindful of during this period of their life? We talked about that and how we need to be pointing them toward God. And then we talked about this verse in particular, Ecclesiastes 11 and verse 10. I was telling Jesse today, this was a great passage, I think, to pull into this discussion. But our kids need to hear it too. It might be a good sermon topic for one of these youth-focused lessons at some point, because they're the ones who need to hear this, to remove grief and anger from your heart and put away pain or evil, in one translation, from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. And so we answered these questions last week about the 3 pieces of advice and the reason. And that brought us to question 4. So help me out tonight. I want to hear what your answers are. In what ways might a teenager manifest grief and anger, and how should we as parents respond to such? So let's start with grief. How does that manifest in a teenager's life?
In terms of isolation, like isolating from family unit, isolating from people that they'd normally be close to.
I know we have an expert in our midst. You deal with mental health, so that's good. I'd love to hear more. Yeah, that's right. Isolating. So teenagers tend to withdraw for various reasons. I'm no psychologist, so I'm sure there's lots of reasons why they do that. But then in isolation, is that always good for your mental health? No, you start overthinking, and I remember being in that situation and almost wishing that my parents would make me come back to the group, because you don't necessarily want to go, but that's what you really need. That's what they need. They need to be around their family and know they have a love and support system. Dad?
What do we really mean by grief?
Okay. What would you think it means?
I think there's different kinds of grief. There's grief over the loss of a loved one. There's grief.
Right.
You're giving me grief. You're irritating me, or annoying me, whatever, that kind of grief. I guess that's what we're talking about here.
I think of it just as literally sorrow, right? Just feeling sad, right? Do you see sadness among teenagers? Yes. They can mope, sulk, get really down on themselves, or just down on their situation, feel like the whole world's against them. Dad's trying to ruin my life, won't let me do what I want, all those sorts of things. I think those would fit into this category. But certainly if there's an actual cause, like a grandmother passes away that they were close to, right? Maybe that was the one person in the world they felt like they could talk to, and now they're gone, right? Or a friend, or a tragedy. They deal with it. Doesn't matter how old you are. You go through one of those traumatic situations and you've got grief to deal with, right? Part of the challenge as parents is recognizing where they are in their development and not treating them like a child, and recognizing, no, they've got some more adult emotions going on, and you need to recognize that, respect that, and let them work through the phases of grief like an adult might need to. Andy?
I could kind of see where you might get grief and anger at the same time. Like if your parents got divorced, whenever you're going through those trying teen years,
Sure.
or in high school, that usually is, I don't know, depending on how the situation is, they have a tendency to want you to pick sides of one of the parents, and so that leads to a lot bigger discussion on the moral of our society. But I could see where that could be a big problem.
Sure. And by the way, I was just looking at Jesse's notes. He's provided me with the cheat sheet for tonight. He has anxiety and depression, a sullen and despondent attitude, right? So I think that's what we mean. So what else? What about the anger piece? So Andy touched on at least one side. Shirley?
Some kids act out of anger. Some teenagers do.
Right.
I didn't have that problem with mine, but some get angry and rebel.
Sure. Yeah. What are some of the drivers, Jesse?
I'm just going to speak from my own experience, but I was probably like PhD in anger by the time I was 15, and I'm still recovering. But I know that in terms of parenting, a lot of my troubles and sorrows from bad decisions and the anger I had at the rest of the world because some people had it figured out and I didn't, was actually because my parents were not very engaged. Generally because I had an absentee father and my stepdad didn't much care about anybody but himself. But long story short, I think that's the idea when we keep talking about training up a child and watching them. And the best example that I can really think of off the top of my head right now is Cain in the Garden of Eden, And he slew his brother, and God kind of went looking for him. And he said, "But wouldn't you be accepted if you would do well?" Right. And I think that's the point, is that the parents should come to the child in the anger and the grief, and he wouldn't isolate himself. That's what he did. He went off. Yeah. And God sought him out. And I think that that's kind of the point. That's just going to be part of life, right? Because you're young, you haven't figured things out, you have an idea of the way they should work. And that's where a lot of the frustration and anger comes from, because you think the world ought to work the way that it doesn't work. And you need that counseling and somebody to bring you in and kind of admonish you a little bit. And when they're not there, if you're not getting that, that makes you twice as angry.
Right. Yeah, I think you said a lot of things there, but being there for the child is critical, and part of the anger can be when they feel like you're not there, right? You maybe are still treating them like a child. I know I've heard of situations where a person feels like they were spanked as if that's all they needed for what they had done wrong, when yes, maybe the discipline was needed, but what else was needed? They needed to talk, right? There was a reason why they acted out in that way, and that simple transaction of, whack, 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 like you do with a 3-year-old, no longer applies. That the punishment may be necessary, but they also need to talk through the problem, whatever the issue is. And so that can just cause a lot of resentment and anger to start to build when the parents are not there when they need them. Melissa?
Like with ours, if they get angry at something, it's something very trivial, but there's probably something else underneath that you've got to figure out what's really got them wound up.
Yep.
Because sometimes they'll get upset about something, and you'll be like, why are they that upset about something so,
Yeah, and we can.
Small, and small to them may not be small to you.
Right.
Small to you may not
Small
be
to you, right? We've got a lifetime of perspective, and we would look at that high school problem and think, you're going to see much bigger problems than that.
High school when we were
And that's
there.
true. That's true.
There can
be.
I have been amazed. Morgan's a junior this year, and I dread the other two going through. from the things that she tells me, that goes on there. And I'm like, where did high school that, like, we went to, where did that go? Because it is not anywhere close to what they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's good to be aware of. Norm?
The hard part about this is that they are teenagers. And we can look at this and as part of the lesson as adults and say manifest grief and anger and parse that out. They're in the middle of transition of learning what the difference is between those two. From child, where they might know what being mad is and being sad is, they can't determine between the difference of anger, mad, furious. They're starting to learn that there's more to feelings than just the simple basics, happy, sad, stuff that children know. And so, as they're trying to figure out what it would mean to manifest grief, as opposed to being irritated, being sad, being upset, and all the various degrees that we understand as adults, as they're trying to figure that out, I've seen two extremes. One, they do the isolation part, or two, they jump the other direction, they become way overactive and act as far as they possibly can go, because to them, they're trying to figure out what's the difference between these things. Like they're learning the vocabulary intellectually,
Right.
but now they're having to assign those things to what they're feeling, and they don't have the experience that adults have of parsing all that stuff out. Unfortunately, parents who aren't involved will not be the person they go to figure that out. They'll go to their peers, and they're in no better condition to give any advice on this stuff because they're going through the same problem trying to define all the things they're going through.
Right.
And so, how might they manifest it? I've seen letters. I've seen total isolation. I've seen completely acting out, knowing full well they're doing it, and they're just, and very rarely is it something that's you would look at it and say, okay, that's a calm response.
Everything is amplified
Once
at that
a bit
age.
of what we would call grown-up understanding has occurred.
Right. Yeah, so that's a good segue. So what should be our response? We've got a child who's dealing with grief and anger. What's a good godly parent's response? And it's not just maybe in the moment. How do we train the child through that phase? Teresa?
I was a teenager that was stuck in either massive grief or massive anger. And
No in between?
No in
No
between.
third option?
And mom and dad would, I would be crying every night about something, and they'd be like, Teresa, you need to decide to be happy. It's a decision. It doesn't just happen. It's not guaranteed by God here on this earth. You have to decide what you're gonna do and feel and get yourself out of this. I can't get you out of this. But worldly possessions isn't gonna help. Only the Lord can help. And
Did you feel like that was good advice at the time?
at the time I was like, okay, yeah, I just need to pray about things.
It was more like, whatever.
But now with your
But
wisdom
constantly
looking back.
looking back, I'm like, wow, I could have gone down the road of suicide or body image issues where, I just hated my body, and I could have gone into bulimia or anorexia, and I didn't, because I had those parents that were supportive and constantly talking to me and encouraging to, here, look at this, we can't be in this grief pit or this high anger anymore. Life doesn't exist there.
Right. Yeah, those are key elements, right? There needs to be communication. We'll talk about that on the next question, or maybe two more. But it's encouragement. It's trying to pull the person up out of the pit. What do you see in this proverb right there? We can't miss the obvious. What's the Ecclesiastes 11 verse 10 telling that child? we've been talking about the elements of the verse, but what's the message of the verse? Youth is fleeting. And it's a father telling a son, remove these things from your life because of this reason, because youth is fleeting. So that's a perspective thing that your teenagers don't have. They feel like you are ruining my life if I don't get to go out this Friday night, because there's nothing beyond Friday night. That's where it's all at, right? You know that there's a lot more to life than that, and there's a lesson that they're having to learn or whatever it is. So we've got to try to give them some perspective. What are some ways to do that? They're told here, but how can they learn it? Shirley?
I think children have a hard time. You can tell them, you know, I was your age one time myself, and it's hard for them to relate.
It's hard to imagine, right?
Yeah, that you went through some of the same things maybe that they're going through.
Right.
And it will get better,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think about how much they can, just having experience with people of different age groups, so they can gain wisdom not only from their parents, but from, it's amazing. The church provides that, the whole family.
I think siblings have a lot of, I know Cindy had a lot of influence on my two younger ones.
Yeah, if they can have a good relationship.
She was older. So, I think they'd go to her before they'd come to me probably.
Right. Did I see some hands? Yes.
I think something for me when I was a teenager that was helpful for me was for my parents to admit that they had done things wrong. And being open about that and giving specific examples from their life and their experience.
Mm-hmm.
If, as a teenager, my parents present to me that they're perfect or they know it all, or, that's not going to help me relate to my parents and then relate to me and me even put any value in what they're telling me. So I think being willing to say I was wrong, I did things wrong. I'm wrong now sometimes, I'm sorry. Those sorts of things help.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, letting the person know that you're not perfect either. Was there another hand over here? Rhonda or no? Jeff?
The difference between, say, the 8-year-old's grief and anger versus the 13-year-old's grief and anger is that floodgate of physical hormones. And as you communicate with them, making sure they understand, look, this is transition. It's not always going to be like this. The one thing that my dad always told me that at the time when you're going through that anger, that's, they're crying or whatever, it will pass. It's going to feel this way for a while, but reassurance, going to get through it. There will be times of peace. Right now it's not, and you're dealing with this flood of hormones that's making the grief and anger go about 1,000 times either direction. But just reassuring that comfort of the communication, it will pass. You will learn to manage these emotions.
Yeah. That's good advice, Norm. And we'll move on to question 5.
Communication is the response. At the point of teenager, you are past the point of taking care of it for them. Now you're moving into the guidance phase. The training to take care of things for them was prior to teenager. When they didn't have the faculties, and they didn't have the capacity to kind of think for themselves and moving in towards adulthood. But as soon as they hit the transition point of moving from child, complete dependence, to learning that they are themselves, they have to build their own faith, and they have to live their own life. That moves, you've now lost, you're past the point of no return of, I get to take care of things for you. Now you're going to have to shift the role as a parent of, I need to now guide. Because now they have to start learning for themselves how God works. And the communication is key, because at that point, I have found it helpful to focus. If they're worried about a particular event that's coming up, I found it best to focus them on the right now. You're in the right now, and you're really upset about something that's going to be in like 3 days. What's the thing that you're upset about in 3 days? This. Okay, so now we're at today. Is there something that you can do today that will make that better 3 days from now? And it's a thought drill that you leave it, but all I do is just ask the questions. What can you do today? And if they come to the conclusion themselves, there's nothing I can do today, then the question is, all right, well, is there anything you can do tomorrow? You just step them forward toward that end point that they're worried about, and let them reach their own conclusions about this is how I should take care of this. It's not me saying, well, look, this is what you ought to do, and this is how you should do it, because they're past that point.
No, that's a good reminder to think about how you're training them to be more responsible and guiding their thought process. Okay, so question 5 is related still back to this same verse in Ecclesiastes 11. What specific admonitions and counsel do young people need to hear often regarding putting away pain from their body or putting away evil from their body? What'd you put here? Yeah?
I just said remind them that they represent you. So when they go out among their friends, you know, they're not only, well, they're representing you, but they're also representing God, and will answer to Him. What else do I say? If they're Christians, I said remind them to choose companions carefully and remember that the Lord is watching.
Okay. Putting away pain and evil from your body, Nora?
Physics. Decisions, every decision has consequences. Good or bad, every decision, every action has consequences. And that's what they need to hear often, because they're at the point where they're learning, they're starting to learn that for themselves. As kids, it's just a matter of learning what gets me spanked and what gets me cookies. But as teenagers, life is far less forgiving about how it treats your decisions than parents.
Yeah, there's two ways to learn, right? By experience and learning, okay, let's not do that, or by just listening. And, you know, every teen's going to do it a little different. They're going to test their boundaries a little different. So as parents, we want the best for them, right? So we know what causes pain in life because we have the benefit of both our education and some experience. So what about on the subject of alcohol? We need to be talking about how it's not what you see on the beer commercials. It's not a party that ends well. It ends badly, right? And they're going to have, you know, some experiences of their own because they're going to see it, right, in high school where people are devastating their lives with that. But we need to be teaching them what the Bible says. Wine is a mocker. Strong drink is a brawler, right? It doesn't bring good things in life. It brings shame and problems. What about, you know, same with drugs, narcotics, all those problems that don't start, right? Don't think just because marijuana was legalized that it's not harmful and bad, you know, going to cause problems in your life, become a gateway to even worse problems, right? We need to teach them to not even take the first opportunity. What about sexual immorality? Does that cause pain and evil in your life? It does. That the passing pleasures of sin, you know, they're mentioned about Moses in Hebrews 11 that he turned away from the passing pleasures of sin. Talk about a passing pleasure followed by all kinds of heartache and problems after a person chooses to be sexually immoral. Jeff?
And the hardest thing is demonstrating to them the potential consequences. You go out and drink and drive and kill somebody. That's going to follow you the rest of your life, and it could destroy our whole family from lawsuits and that. But making a 16-year-old think about that, they go got on their mind, I can drive now. It's difficult to sit them down and get them to understand the true consequences, or to your point, you know, one immoral act and you get somebody pregnant, and now that's something you got to deal with.
Right.
And things, it's hard because they don't, like you're saying, all they're thinking about is Friday night. They're not thinking about what it can lead to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What else? Oh, sorry, Lindsay.
I think it's important too to make sure that they understand that when they do, because they are going to make mistakes, they are going to sin. Hopefully not as those big things, but they might. And it's important important that they understand that you will still love them anyway when that happens, and that you will help them with that and help them, because otherwise if they're hiding it, that's only going to cause more pain and more sinning and more problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always an understanding of love is unconditional, right? Sometimes there's a time, when especially when a child is being stubborn and rebellious, where where love might manifest itself in some pretty harsh consequences for that. But there should always be an understanding that I'm doing this punishment because I love you, because I want you to see the right way to live before God, right? And you will bear good fruit in your life once you're trained by it. Those are hard lessons to learn, but yeah, we're here to help them, right? One day they may return the favor, right? In our old age where they're helping us, but we're constantly there to help them. What about low self-esteem? There's some pain that comes from that. What do we do to counteract that?
Point out the good that they're doing.
Right. Don't fail to encourage and praise what's praiseworthy. What else can we do? If we're telling a kid they're great at something when they know they're not good at it, do they believe you? No, that's just empty praise, right? That's not going to do anybody any good. April?
And pointing back to the scripture that we are made in the image of God, and that we are the temple of God. Our bodies are the temple of God, and it's pointing back to that we are God's creation. I think that's really important to bring them back to the scripture.
Right. Yeah, their worth, their value isn't about what another person thinks of them or even what we think of them, right? It's what God thinks of them, right? God's estimation of us. Daniel was called the one who was highly esteemed by God. So it didn't matter what his self-esteem was, he was highly esteemed by God. That's what the 10 and 12-year-old class is studying right now. Jeff?
What you were saying, though, everybody's good at something. And if you can help them find the things that they like and are good at, and then encourage them to even participate in those activities with them, then you will build them up, and that gives them confidence that, well, I might not be the best basketball player around, but I can play disc golf or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Just the thing that they like and that they're good at, and help them excel at it.
Yeah, that's one thing that Bonnie's dad has pointed out that he taught his kids was he recognized that real confidence comes from knowing that you're capable of doing something. And so that's why, from an early age, he's got them working and contributing to the family economy, or it's, joining in the workday, or, why don't you get up on the tractor and back it up for me while I do something else? Oh, I can drive that? Wow. As soon as they're capable, you're giving them those opportunities, and that's where real confidence comes from. It's not that, here's your participation trophy, but you were the worst one on the team. That's not, or they're just telling me, you're great. Those are just empty words. Real confidence comes from knowing you can do something. And so, teach them to work hard at something, and then they'll find the satisfaction in their own work. Isn't that what we see in the scriptures, right? Even from God, he works, he creates, and then he sees that his work is good. He calls it good, and he's pleased, right? And so we do the same. As we work, we see we get pleasure from seeing our accomplishments. It can also pull them out of their self, right, where they're can get a little selfish and get down on themselves and into these grief and anger attitudes is when they're out working and serving others. I didn't mention pornography. Obviously, that's a teen issue that kids can get embroiled in and can lead to all kinds of pain and evil in their lives. We need to help them through that and address it with them. Anything else on this point that comes to mind? I don't think I mentioned smoking.
I don't think you did.
I mentioned marijuana. That's one of them.
But anyhow, this is the age that kids get into smoking.
Right.
And a lot of times it just goes on and on and on.
Right.
They don't make a quit.
Peer pressure, wanting to, fit in, or even just wanting the chemical benefits. And now it's what? Vaping. Vaping, right? And they've been told by the media that this is safe, right? All the problems of smoking are taken out, and the good stuff, which is the nicotine, is still there. Good as far as what you might want, right? Couldn't be further from the truth, right? At a time when a child is developing a chemical addiction to something so that you can relax is not what they need, first of all. Second of all, the scriptures teach I will not be addicted to anything or mastered by anything over in 1 Corinthians 6, so it's not godly behavior. And then third, there's all kinds of health problems that they're discovering that come from it as well. Big health risks. So I'm sure there's more we could say on that, but we need to just teach them that, our body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. We don't need to be abusing it. It's here. It's given to us so that we can serve Him. Use our bodies to serve Him, not to serve ourselves. All right, so the next question is about communication. Obviously, this is key in any relationship, but it's hard with your kids. It's hard to maintain that. So what are some tips or advice that you guys have for maintaining or developing good communication even through the teenage years? Yeah.
Attitude really matters when you're giving that counsel. You can give all the right counsel and the right advice, but you can do it in a way that is really offensive and provokes a child to wrath. So I think you have to be careful about how you establish rapport with them and the attitude that you bring when you're giving that advice and counsel, because it can make all the difference to whether they listen or turn you off.
Yeah, great points. Melissa? What's that?
If you don't listen, they won't.
That's right. You've got to be a listener. That's a big part of communication. Active listening, right? Clarissa?
I'm kind of, Zoe, and they all may be different, but right now she's really she'll get to talking and then she'll tell me every aspect. And I'm not necessarily meaning, there have been some in-depth, deeper stuff, but she too she's getting more active into a lot more things. She's in 7th grade, she's noticing things that other people are doing or whatever. So I love that she will get on these big long tangents, and it can last for a while. So I have to make sure that I'm really paying attention and responding, and well, what do you think about that? Just having good communication, and she loves it. At the end, she's like, "Oh, I just love that we can talk like this," and I can just tell that she's maturing and she appreciates. So I have to make sure that I stay dialed in, which can be difficult, whenever I need to be kind of moving on to something else, because it can go for a while. But so it's just, and it may not be that way like that with Wyatt and Elise. I hope it is. But right now I'm in this stage with Zoe where she is wanting to share. So I want to encourage that and not lose that.
And I was demonstrating what I can do by accident sometimes without thinking is I'm not really paying attention to my kid, right? I'm just looking at my phone and they're talking at me and I'm like, We got to put it down, guys. It's an addiction of its own, right? We got to let them know, because it's our actions speak louder than words sometimes. Lauren?
I think it's really important to teach your child how to have a conversation, not just to sit while someone talks at you or for you to do all the talking, but to have the back and forth and learn how to work through disagreements and things like that. Not necessarily argue at each other, but you have a point and I have a point, and neither of us has to be right or wrong. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We can have different feelings about
right.
things.
Understanding all sides.
Communicate with each other. Have a conversation.
It's a skill that will reap great benefits in their life. That's a skill they'll need in their jobs and everything else, in groups, everything. So, yeah, great points. And Clarissa talked about how a kid will enter a phase where they're willing to offer all this information. If you're unavailable then, what's going to happen? They're not coming back, right? So parenting is work. We've been emphasizing that all the way along. And you're going to be tired, and you're going to be really wishing to have a little bit of you time at the end of the day. And now they're staying up late, later than you are, and it's like, when are they going to go away? They're not. They're going to go away when they graduate, and you're going to have lost all of your chances to raise them. So you got to make the most of your time and give them that time. Listen and take those, because when you want to talk at 3 o'clock on the way home from school, they might not want to, but by 10:30, now they're ready to talk. So you got to be there. Damon?
All of Chris's major issues happened like 10:30, 11 o'clock. So she wanted to talk about all the stuff that she's been projecting. Oh, my life is going to be. I said, you're like 14. What are you talking about your life? So that would go on for an hour. So we were trying to go to bed, and she's like going through everything that she's ever, So the timing, you just have to listen. I mean, we're going to have to lose sleep. And, but it was always late at night. It's all of the problems that want to be discussed. So that each kid has a different time of discovery where they want to talk, like you were talking about, that they want to tell you about, these people are different than us. They're acting a different way. Why is that? They're asking you all this stuff because they know their life, and then they see other kids who are living, supposed to be the same kind of life, but there's something, and they want to talk about it. And that can take a long time, but you just have to sit through it.
We've got to do some initiating too of our own, because certain things are not going to come up. And so we can't get all the way to the end and find out, they don't even, share these godly values that we find in the scriptures. We need to be bringing it up, because it's definitely being brought up at school. And so they may feel embarrassed to talk about the stuff they're hearing, but they're talking about it with their friends and forming a view. So we've got to bring up what is God's view on all the things that we just talked about, right? Even, the newer issues like, gender issues and homosexuality and all those things that don't think it's not going to tempt our kids to go off into those directions, because peer pressure is pushing them in those directions. Where when we were in school, maybe back in the 90s or the 80s, the peer pressure was against those things. Those were the weirdos and the outcasts. Now they're the in crowd. And so it's difficult. So we got to bring it up, make sure they know what does God's will say. And yes, you will be hated, just like Jesus was hated. Norm?
The biggest part of this is nice when they are the one that's communicative. All our job is then is to listen and give good advice, which we should have for doing what's right.
Yeah, that's the easy kid.
But if you got more than one, if you get more than one that's communicative, you're very lucky. I've got both. I've got the one that's really communicative, loves to talk to me, and I got the one that you have to pull teeth to get her to say 2 words. But with both, you still need to engage in communication. The talkative comes when you engage in the conversation and they realize, the talkative one will realize, hey, I can talk to this one too. And they'll open up. But if the other one's not going to communicate, you still have to engage in the communication. And you have to pry, and you have to prod. And you have to keep trying different angles, different avenues. But you still have to keep trying, because at some point you're going to reach the part where, okay, we're going to talk about this. And use that as an end. And oftentimes I end up using Yara's the talkative one, Kaylin's not. I will have a conversation with both of them in the car. And I'll be having a conversation with Yara. And I'll look at Kaylin, and I'll talk to Kaylin about it. While Kiara is the one with having the conversation with me, because I know she's not going to say anything. You're just going to let her sister say all the things. She's very good at learning that way.
Right.
But she needs to know also that this communication that I'm having with her older sisters, one I'm also going to have with her. And she doesn't want to open her mouth. She still wants to always go to her mom, and that's been a challenge for me her whole life. but it's something where the communication, as the parent, you need to be on top of that.
Yeah. Now, I know we talked about Deuteronomy 6, verse 7 in prior classes about you shall teach the scriptures diligently to your family and talk of them when you sit in your house. That's communication, right? So part of this communication needs to be talking about the scriptures. And so you need to think about how are we going to work the scriptures into our daily life. And if it's difficult, and you need to start early, that maybe we need to actually carve out time to have Bible time with our family, where we're going to open a scripture, read it together, talk about it, and then go back to what we were doing. That time is so valuable because it helps to put us, especially with your teens, it puts us all on the same level for a moment because we're all hearing from our Father, right? It's their Father and my Father. And how does this instruct me to be better? It's a great time for personal confession that I struggle with this. And then they see, hey, we're kind of the same. We can relate. And then receiving God's guidance for the day. You'll be surprised, whatever passage you choose, boy, there's some application for what I'm dealing with right now. God's word seems to be amazingly helpful in that way. All right, well, we got almost to question 7, so if Jesse wants to finish up on 7 and 8 next week, we'll do that. Thank you, everyone.